Hello everybody, welcome back to another Smart Board System video, and in today's video we're going to be doing what if the United States became an empire. So let's just jump straight into the video. Okay, first I think the US is going to go after Canada, so let's just do that. So there's going to be some troops coming out of New York and Michigan to basically just take this area, and some out of New England. There'll be some that come out of Washington to try and get the British Columbian coast. And they capture this island. Minnesota starts pushing up into Canada, and basically the soldiers are trying to get rid of all the access to Canada's Great Lakes. The US takes a little bit more of Canada's coastline. They start doing a little bit of island hopping until they eventually reach Alaska, where they connect the front. And even though there's not that many people in Alaska, it's still good. Minnesota and Michigan connect through Canada, and they keep pushing upwards. The New England states go into New Brunswick. Eventually they land on this island, I think it's Newfoundland. The US tries to meet up with this front, which they do successfully. I may or may not have forgotten to make Canada blue. We're just gonna pretend that I did. Canada pushes back against the United States, getting to the border. Canada tries to get its cities, but the United States stands strong. The United States is kicked off this island, and this one. They get kicked off the coast right here, and Canada takes some of this back. But other than that, they kind of ran out of forces, so they're kind of done for. So now they're gonna go up, and the United States will just keep pushing up till eventually they get a bunch of key cities, and Canada just decides to surrender. Okay, now let's look at the peace treaty. Okay, what happened in the peace treaty was the United States got connected to Alaska, and they got a lot of the coastal areas right down here, and they got some of the major cities, and I think Ottawa's there, and also Quebec got independence, and Newfoundland also joined Quebec. So basically this is just a frozen tundra with I think maybe one or two major cities like Alberta. Now the United States is going to invade Mexico. Okay, so first the United States is going to invade from California, and they're going to push down into Baja California. Meanwhile, Texas will kind of just invade along the border. Eventually all of Baja California will be annexed, and then California will try and link up with this, which they do successfully, and then they start pushing down. Mexico actually puts up a fight, unlike Canada, and they begin to push back up to the border. This doesn't really work though, and they just get pushed back out, all the way back down. The United States keeps pushing down into these mountains until eventually there's a stalemate. After a 3-month-long stalemate, another front opens up as the United States invades the Yucatan Peninsula, and Mexico has to pull soldiers from here, which breaks the stalemate, and eventually they reach Mexico City, and then Mexico surrenders. So let's see how a peace treaty looks. Okay, so in this peace treaty, the United States took basically the top six or seven states, I think. Basically all the desert states over here, Baja California, and the United States got the Yucatan Peninsula. So now the United States is going to go after basically the entirety of the Caribbean. So let's see how this plays out. Yeah, that's kind of what I expected to happen. So now we're going to move on to Central America, where they'll invade Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua. But they will team up with Costa Rica and Panama, but that's just kind of because they don't have really a military. So they'll just kind of, they'll be in alliance with them. They won't annex. So the United States uses its ports in Costa Rica to invade upwards, but it's kind of hard because Nicaragua is like really mountainous. So instead they use Yucatan, get rid of Belize, I think. Sometimes I get Belize and El Salvador mixed up. They'll just slowly push down into Guatemala. They'll keep trying to push up into the Nicaraguan mountains. They kind of have no use, so they'll just have to force them to surrender. The United States invades even more into Guatemala. Then they use a bulge technique and surround a ton of soldiers, which causes El Salvador to surrender. And they keep invading into Honduras and Nicaragua until Honduras surrenders, and finally Nicaragua surrenders. So let's look at a peace treaty. Okay, in this treaty, the United States gained Guatemala and Belize, and Panama and Costa Rica united and took some of southern Nicaragua, and Nicaragua became a puppet state. But Honduras and El Salvador, they're fine. Nothing happened to them, except they kind of lost a lot of soldiers, but that doesn't matter. The United States will provide aid to them. So now it's time to move on to South America, which, yeah, it's not going to be pretty. But what's going to happen is Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela. I don't know if Venezuela would team up with Colombia, but we're just going to say that they do. And Peru will team up with them. But basically, this is not going to be pretty. At first, it looks like the alliance is winning, but then the United States kinda does a land invasion of Venezuela. And guess who comes in to help the United States? None other than Guyana. So Venezuela is kinda cooked now. The South American, what should I call this alliance? I'm going to call it the South American Coalition. So they keep pushing up and almost get rid of Central America. I'm just going to call it that. But then they kind of get pushed back quite a bit, and then get pushed back even more. Eventually they just get kicked straight out. And now the United States is kind of taking them out from both sides. Colombia is pretty strong, and Peru is, but sadly Ecuador and Venezuela are not as strong. So the United States does another coastal invasion. They attempt to connect up with this one, but they actually get pushed back, surprisingly. The United States is getting pushed almost completely out of South America. So you know who joins in on this war? That's right, it's Brazil. Basically, Brazil just kinda launches a full-scale invasion of all of these countries and creates a spearhead to try and reach the Americans. They all escape and go back over to Panama to try and help out. They meet up with the Americans in Venezuela. Guyana comes back to help. Brazil and the United States try and focus on Venezuela so they can get free oil. Eventually they sever Venezuela from the rest and it just collapses. Then the United States decides to go down the coast where Brazil is so they can meet up, and they eventually do, cutting off Peru and Colombia. Ecuador surrenders, and then slowly Colombia gets squished until it surrenders. Peru surrenders too. This is a giant war that just happened. So let's look at the peace treaty. Okay, this is the final treaty that happens. So basically, Central America gets a bunch of Colombian and Ecuadorian coast. Colombia gets this little bit of land, so they actually have like a coastline. Guyana gets a huge chunk out of Venezuela. Brazil gets a huge chunk out of Colombia and Peru. Although Peru isn't really that much touched. And Venezuela, the rest of it becomes an American puppet state. And last up, what we're going to do is the United States buys Greenland. There we go. I think that's going to be it for today's video. So let me know if you want to see more, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye!